Welcome to the show, everybody. We have a bunch of different COVID news to go over and so many different things. Glad you're with us. Going to be a very, very full week. To start with, we are potentially just minutes, hours, maybe a day from full FDA approval for the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. This is important not only from the standpoint of medical, but also because of how this may or may not impact anti-vax individuals who have been saying, as soon as there's full approval, not emergency use, I will go and get myself vaccinated. And I've expressed skepticism that all of the people saying that are actually going to do it. But we'll get to that in a moment. There's a new report from the New York Times, which tells us that the FDA is hoping to approve the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine. That's the 2-dose regimen, relevant because we're already talking about a third dose. The 2-dose regimen of that vaccine, full approval expected today. If there's a delay, maybe an additional day or two. So this timeline is, on the one hand, it's later than many people had hoped. There's been a lot of why is this taking as long as it's taking? It's also sooner than some of the least optimistic timelines, which we're looking at, later in the fall or at least into September. I believe that as far as those anti-vax people who have been saying, once it's fully approved, I will go and get vaccinated. I think that for a significant portion of them, it was just a talking point. It was just something that they came up with to say, to make themselves seem rational, to make themselves appear as though it's not just unhinged anti-vaxxerism. It's once it's approved, I will go and get vaccinated. Some of them probably will, but many will just come up with a new talking point. For example, if they want to, they'll move the goalposts to, well, it's approved, but it was a very political approval, and it was rushed and influenced by the Biden administration, so we can't trust the full approval. I would have gone and gotten the vaccine if it had been a fair and reliable approval, but it was clearly a rushed approval. No evidence of that, but the reality is some of them are going to come up with something new. Now, the other piece of this, the other reason this is important, is that there have been many organizations, schools, employers, governments, etc., that have been thinking about, do we require vaccination for our customers, for our employees, for students coming back to campus? Some have already put in place some of those requirements, but others have hesitated because, after all, the vaccine is approved under emergency use. They would feel more comfortable requiring a vaccine once it is fully approved by the FDA. So that's the other reality. The requirements and the mandates are likely to increase significantly once this vaccine is fully approved, which again should be later today or potentially tomorrow. Some people say they are against mandating a vaccine that's only approved for emergency use. And so when we have full approval, we're expecting to also see a number of additional requirements and mandates. And my guess is that the people in the anti-vax contingent who have been saying, the problem now is it's not fully approved, are going to shift to focusing on what they will say are authoritarian and dictatorial vaccine requirements once it is fully approved. And the expectation is there's going to be a lot of them. There are some hospitals and universities that are expected to mandate vaccination once the full approval hits. The Pentagon said earlier this month that they are planning to make COVID vaccines mandatory for the roughly 1.3 million active duty troops no later than the middle of next month, but even sooner if the FDA grants that full approval, which we're now expecting any moment. Now, I mentioned that this is approval of a 2-dose regimen. You might be saying, well, David, hold on. Last week you mentioned now there's a recommendation for a third shot at the 8-month mark, but the approval is only for 2 shots. That's exactly right. That is, the Biden administration announced you should, at the 8-month mark, start getting yourself a third dose. The approval right now that's been submitted by Pfizer, which was submitted months ago, is for a 2-dose regimen. So the expectation is once this is approved on the 2-dose regimen, the Pfizer will immediately submit to the FDA for expedited approval of that third booster shot. And then we'll see how long that takes. So the bottom line here is, when we looked at the reasons why those who didn't want the vaccine, about a third said, I will get it if and only if it receives a full FDA approval. That's going to happen. I suspect not a full third of those who are against the vaccine are going to go and get it once it's approved. I think it will have an impact. How big it will be, I don't know. Now, one bit of good news recently, by the way, after a really long period of declines in daily vaccination in the US and then very slow ascent, we are now back to 3 consecutive days with 1 million doses per day, with roughly about 575,000 people each day being newly receiving 1 dose. That's very good news. 200 million Americans have now received at least 1 dose of the vaccine. And in terms of what would work to better incentivize people to go and get vaccinated, remember that when Joe Biden encouraged and New York City announced $100 if you go and get yourself vaccinated, the $100 didn't really seem to be very influential to people. And there was a poll done, and the most effective hypothetical requirement was, if you needed a vaccine to fly, 41% of anti-vaxxers said they would go and get themselves vaccinated. That seems to be a really big deal. And then, as we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the program, I suspect that if you made copays 50% instead of $20, like imagine you have insurance where your copayment is $20, or maybe in the emergency room, maybe in the ER, it's $200, $300. If you make it 50% coinsurance, if you're not vaccinated, meaning if you're not vaccinated and you need to go to the hospital for COVID, you pay 50%, no more copay. I think a ton of these people would go and get themselves vaccinated. It's not clear anything like that is on the horizon, but needless to say, I think it's something that would very much work. Let's be honest, most healthy snack bars are not exciting like my live streams. And that's why you should check out our sponsor, Monk Pack. Monk Pack Keto Nut and Seed Bars are sweet and delicious, soft and chewy with a big satisfying crunch. But each bar has just 1 gram of sugar, 2 to 3 net carbs, and just 150 calories. So it's great for someone on a keto or low carb diet, or even if you just want a tasty, sweet snack without the sugar. Monk Pack Keto Nut and Seed Bars come in great flavors like sea salt dark chocolate, caramel sea salt, or caramel, you choose, and peanut butter dark chocolate. I always have a box of these ready to go in my pantry, which is easy when you do the optional monthly subscription, which also saves you 10%. If you have a sweet tooth, this is the way to indulge without the guilt, whether it's for breakfast or in the car or after a workout. Go to monkpack.com. The link is under this video, and you'll save 20% when you use code PACMAN at checkout.